Long before fitness became an industry, before the glossy gyms and influencer culture, the iron lived underground. It was hidden in basements, garages, and forgotten warehouses, places that smelled like rust, dust, and determination. There was nothing glamorous about them. The walls were cracked, the air heavy, the lighting dim and flickering. Yet inside those dark rooms, something sacred was being forged. Not just muscle, but identity. In those early days, gyms weren't built for comfort. They were built for survival. The equipment was crude, bars welded from pipes, plates poured from concrete, benches patched together from wood and leather. It wasn't pretty, but it didn't need to be. The only thing that mattered was weight. Real, unforgiving weight. And the men and women who came there didn't care about how it looked. They came for what it made them feel. Every rep was a battle, every set a conversation between pain and willpower. You could hear it in the way the iron hit the floor. Raw, metallic, honest. There were no mirrors to admire yourself, no trainers shouting encouragement, no curated playlists. Just the sound of lungs gasping, metal grinding, and gravity reminding you who's in charge. It was pure chaos, and it was perfect. The gym back then wasn't a place of status. It was a sanctuary for outsiders, the ones who didn't fit in elsewhere. The misfits, the laborers, the boxers, the veterans, people who needed somewhere to put their aggression, their doubts, their anger. For them, the barbell was therapy. The iron didn't care about your past, your mistakes, or your failures. It didn't judge. It simply asked one question: can you lift me today? And that's what made those places beautiful. The gym wasn't a stage, it was a refuge. When you walked through that door, nothing else existed. Bills, heartbreaks, fears, all of it stayed outside. Inside, there was only the fight. You didn't compete with others, you competed with yourself. The lifter next to you wasn't your rival, he was your mirror. And when you saw him struggling, grinding, and refusing to quit, it pushed you to do the same. There was an unspoken code among the early lifters: respect the work. Nobody cared how much you lifted, they cared how you lifted, with effort, with intent, with respect for the iron. The gym had hierarchy, but it wasn't built on size or strength. It was built on consistency. The regulars earned their status not by bragging, but by showing up day after day, bleeding through the same calluses and tearing through the same pain. And yet, even in that raw simplicity, there was philosophy. Those who lifted knew that it wasn't just about the body. It was about control, about taming chaos. Each plate you loaded was a promise to yourself, a promise to show up when no one's watching, to suffer without applause, to turn pain into purpose. The iron was the teacher, and the lesson was discipline. Outside those gyms, nobody cared about lifting. Most people didn't even understand it. They saw it as something primitive, maybe even vain. But for those inside, it was almost spiritual. There was a certain freedom in knowing that the only thing standing between you and progress was effort. No politics, no luck, no shortcuts, just raw cause and effect. You put in the work, you got the reward. If you didn't, the bar wouldn't move. Simple, brutal, honest. The air inside those places was thick with something words can't describe, a mix of sweat, iron, chalk, and pride. You could feel it in your bones the moment you walked in. It was like stepping into another dimension, one where the world outside didn't matter. The rules of society didn't apply. No one cared about your job, your reputation, your clothes. You were stripped down to your most basic form, a body, a will, and a weight that didn't care about either. And that's where the earliest brotherhood of iron was born. You could walk into a gym anywhere, in Detroit, in London, in Moscow, and feel that same energy, the same unwritten laws, the same respect for struggle. It connected people who might never speak the same language, but understood the same truth. Strength isn't something you're given. It's something you earn, one painful rep at a time. In those underground rooms, everything was earned. There were no contracts, no supplements, no sponsorships, just lifters, chalk, and steel. When you dropped a weight, the sound echoed like thunder, a reminder that this was real. Nothing simulated, nothing virtual, nothing fake. Every scar told a story, every set left a mark, and every failure taught more than success ever could. Those early gyms were the birthplace of something much bigger than fitness. They were the origin of a mindset, one that would later shape the entire world of strength, sport, and even self-improvement. But back then, no one thought about that. Nobody planned to start a movement. They were just chasing something real in a world full of noise, something that made sense. And it made sense because it was simple. Lift, fail, learn, repeat. That simplicity was power. In a world where everything was unpredictable, the iron gave you certainty. It was a constant, always heavy, always honest. You couldn't fake it, couldn't cheat it, couldn't sweet-talk it. You either picked it up or you didn't. And when you finally did, when the bar moved, even slightly, that feeling was pure truth. It wasn't about looking better. It wasn't about being admired. It was about control over the body, over the mind, over the chaos of life. The early lifters didn't talk about mental health or mindfulness. They just lived it. Every time they stepped under that bar, they faced themselves, stripped of ego, stripped of excuses. That's what made it sacred. So when people today talk about gym culture, they often forget where it started. It didn't come from franchises or fitness trends. It came from those dimly lit rooms where people screamed through pain and found peace in the process. That's the soil where the roots of modern fitness grew. Deep, dark, unfiltered. And though the world above has changed, that foundation still exists. You can still find it in certain places. The clang of real plates, the smell of chalk, the silence after a failed lift. Because that's where it all began. In the underground, in the rust, in the grit. Before the cameras, before the fame, before fitness had a brand. Back when the iron was real, and so were the people who lifted it. Out of the basements and garages came something that no one expected. Not just stronger bodies, but stronger people. What started as a handful of outsiders pushing metal in the dark slowly turned into a movement. The gym wasn't just a place to lift anymore. It became a place to belong. Those who trained together formed bonds deeper than friendship, something closer to brotherhood, the kind that didn't need words. You didn't have to explain why you were there. Everyone already knew. You were chasing the same feeling, that quiet moment when pain turns into power. This was the rise of the Brotherhood of Iron, a culture built on respect, discipline, and mutual struggle. It didn't matter who you were outside those walls. Inside, everyone started from zero. The bar didn't care about race, money, or ego. It demanded effort, and only effort. The man next to you could be a dock worker, a cop, or a kid from the street. None of that mattered when the bar was loaded. In that moment, you were equals, soldiers in the same war against weakness. That's what made it different from any other sport. There was no crowd cheering, no medals waiting, no glory guaranteed. The reward was internal, the slow, steady transformation that nobody else could see but you. The iron gave you feedback the world never did, immediate, honest, and unforgiving. And that honesty was addictive. Once you tasted it, there was no going back. In those days, lifters didn't talk much. There wasn't time for it. Words didn't build muscle, effort did. But when someone spotted you on a heavy set, or when you failed and heard a calm, "You got this," that was real connection, built through shared suffering. You didn't have to explain what it meant. You both knew what it took to walk back to that bar and try again. The brotherhood wasn't something you joined. It was something you earned. It didn't matter if you were strong or weak. What mattered was that you showed up and gave everything you had. There was no fake humility, no performance. The gym stripped you bare, and people saw you for who you really were. Some couldn't handle that and quit. The ones who stayed, they became part of something eternal. The language of that brotherhood wasn't spoken. It was lived. You could see it in the small rituals, the shared chalk bucket, the nod of respect before a big lift, the silence before someone went for a personal record. You could feel it in the atmosphere, the weight of unspoken trust. No contracts, no promises, no social media posts. Just loyalty forged through effort. In the 70s, this culture started spreading. Old school gyms popped up everywhere, places with names like Iron Pit, Powerhouse, The Dungeon. They weren't franchises, they were families. The same faces showed up every day, pushing each other, laughing, bleeding, taping wrists, and arguing about form. Each gym had its own identity, its own rules, but the soul was the same everywhere. Respect the work, respect the iron. By the 70s, Lifting wasn't hiding in basements anymore. It moved into the sun. Venice Beach, California. The smell of salt, sweat, and sunscreen mixed in the air. You could walk down the boardwalk and hear iron clanging from blocks away. Guys trained shirtless, tanned, and built like statues. Tourists stopped to watch, not because it was weird, but because it was mesmerizing. Gold's Gym became the epicenter of it all, the place that turned the underground into a movement. The guys who trained there weren't just lifters, they were characters. Big personalities, loud laughs, egos colliding and still somehow fitting in one room. Arnold, Franco, Zane, Ferrigno. They were all different, but all shared the same obsession. Train, eat, sleep, repeat. That was the formula. Simple, brutal, effective. There were no fancy machines or mirror lighting, just basic gear, chalk everywhere, and the smell of effort. The music was the sound of metal hitting the floor. The training was raw, direct, and hard as hell. You didn't need to be told what to do. You learned by watching the guy next to you go to war with the barbell. It wasn't about image yet, though it looked like art. These dudes were just trying to outwork everyone, including their past selves. No one said the word content. The only content was progress. And when a guy hit a new lift or came in shredded for competition, everyone felt it. Not jealousy, but that, damn, I need to step up kind of motivation. This was the golden era, the point where lifting met culture. For the first time, being strong looked cool. Magazines started showing physiques that looked superhuman. But it didn't feel fake. It felt earned. You could see the veins, the sweat, the work. And behind all that glamour, it was still pain, just presented with a Californian tan. Then came Pumping Iron, a low-budget documentary that changed everything. It wasn't meant to be mainstream, but people loved it. It showed something honest, the grind, the rivalry, the humor. It made the world realize that these muscle guys weren't meatheads. They were artists using their bodies as canvas. And the biggest artist of them all was Arnold. Arnold had more than size. He had presence. The guy could talk, joke, compete, and still dominate everyone. He was the first bodybuilder who understood that lifting wasn't just about weight. It was about charisma, about story. When he said, "The pump is like coming," it sounded ridiculous, but everyone got it. He made training sound poetic without trying. That's when bodybuilding stopped being niche and started being global. Magazines sold out. Every teenager suddenly wanted a barbell and a dream. Gym memberships went up. The subculture that once belonged to a few maniacs was now a full-blown lifestyle. And it wasn't just for men. Women started joining too, inspired by the same energy. The idea that strength could look beautiful. But the vibe back then was different. These guys weren't chasing fame. Fame just happened to find them. They weren't selling supplements or programs. They were just obsessed with improvement. They'd train until they collapsed, grab a burger, laugh it off, and be back the next morning. It was brutal, but there was freedom in that simplicity. There was competition, sure, but it was friendly fire. They pushed each other, trash-talked, and still spotted one another when it mattered. That mix of rivalry and brotherhood made every session electric. Everyone wanted to win, but no one wanted to see someone quit. That balance made the whole scene feel alive. The cool part? It was never perfect. The gyms were hot, crowded, smelled like sweat and old leather. But no one complained. No one cared about air conditioning or playlists. The focus was crystal clear. Get better. You either lifted or you left. That's it. And that era created something the industry still tries to fake today. Authenticity. You can buy better machines now, fancier clothes, designer supplements, but you can't buy that energy. It was lightning in a bottle, a mix of hunger, competition, and pure fun. Toward the late 70s, things started changing. Big brands saw potential. Magazines began adding ads for protein powders and gear. Strength was turning into a business. Nobody saw it as selling out. Not yet. But it was the start. Every movement that catches fire eventually gets packaged. The golden era was the peak, a perfect storm of talent, timing, and passion. It made lifting cool, made strength mainstream, and gave the world its first gym icons. But it also opened the door for what came next, the age of marketing, mass gyms, and the birth of the fitness industry. Still, no matter how much time passes, that decade keeps coming up like a legend, because it was the moment the iron world found its face. It proved that lifting wasn't weird or underground or dangerous. It was art, discipline, and power. And maybe that's the beauty of it, that even without social media sponsorships or algorithms, those guys built something that still echoes 50 years later. The world saw them and thought, maybe strength isn't just about muscles. Maybe it's about how far you can take yourself. That's the thought that stuck. That's why the golden era never really ended. That was when lifting stopped being just physical and became something more, a moral code. It taught patience, humility, and persistence in a world that rewarded shortcuts. The people who lived by it carried that mentality outside the gym. You could see it in the way they walked, the way they handled problems. They weren't just building muscle, they were building character. And that's when the legends started to appear, names that would echo through generations. Guys like Steve Reeves, Reg Park, Marvin Eder, they weren't celebrities, they were proof. Proof that discipline and effort could shape a human being into something extraordinary. Their pictures started to circulate, not as vanity, but as inspiration. They gave a face to what the iron could make you become. Those early icons didn't sell dreams, they embodied them. They trained with focus, ate with purpose, lived with simplicity. Their lives revolved around a singular mission, progress. And through them, the Brotherhood gained its mythology. They showed that strength wasn't about domination. It was about mastery, of self, of mind, of body. Every gym had stories about the old-timers, the guy who trained through pain, who lifted through heartbreak, who never missed a day. Their discipline became folklore. They didn't have to brag. Their consistency spoke louder than any words. When a newcomer walked in, he'd feel that presence, not from trophies or posters, but from the way the veterans moved, quiet, focused, relentless. The Brotherhood wasn't built on fame, it was built on example. You learned by watching, by failing, by being corrected, by showing up again. It was mentorship without speeches. Someone might hand you chalk, adjust your grip, or tell you, don't quit on the rep. That was love in its purest form, not soft, but real. Tough love forged through shared hardship. As the culture grew, so did its influence. Strength training began crossing into sports, into rehabilitation, even into psychology. People started realizing that the lessons learned under the bar applied everywhere else. The iron was therapy before therapy had a name. It taught how to deal with failure, how to push through pain, how to keep moving forward when nothing else made sense. But even as the outside world started noticing, the lifters didn't train for recognition. They trained for redemption. Every day in the gym was another small act of rebellion against weakness, physical, mental, emotional. And that rebellion was contagious. The more people joined, the stronger the culture became. By the time the 70s rolled around, the Brotherhood of Iron had evolved into a full-blown subculture. The gyms still looked rough, but the people inside walked with quiet pride. They knew they were part of something outsiders couldn't understand. They didn't need approval because they already had purpose. And that's what made the old-school lifters so different from what came later. They didn't train to be seen. They trained to be tested. The iron was both the judge and the teacher. It punished arrogance and rewarded effort. In a world obsessed with appearances, this was truth. Pure, unfiltered truth. That's the soul of the Brotherhood, born in rust, baptized in sweat, bound by respect. It was never written down, never advertised, but passed through generations like a sacred code. And it's still alive today, in every lifter who shows up when no one's watching, in every rep that hurts but doesn't stop. The Brotherhood of Iron wasn't just the next step in fitness. It was the moment the culture found its heart. The underground had found its voice, and soon, the whole world would hear it. By the 80s, the world had officially caught the iron fever. What started as a handful of maniacs training on the beach had turned into a full-blown movement. Every city wanted a Gold's Gym of its own. The media called it the fitness boom, and they weren't wrong. It was everywhere. Posters, TV shows, commercials, even morning talk shows had segments on how to sculpt your body like Arnold. Gyms started popping up in shopping malls, bright lights, new machines, towels with logos, all clean, polished, and friendly. The rough edges of the old school were gone. You didn't have to be hardcore anymore to train. You just needed a membership. The iron had gone mainstream. But here's the twist. The more popular it got, the less dangerous it felt. The challenge was still there, but the atmosphere changed. Training wasn't about surviving another brutal session. It was about convenience. People started caring about calories burned, heart rates, and target zones. The science of fitness was becoming a product, something you could buy, schedule, and track. The supplement market exploded. Protein powders that tasted like milkshakes, fat burners promising miracles, vitamins with shiny labels. You could walk into a store and buy strength in a can. At least that's what the ads said. Every brand claimed to have the secret, and people believed it, because now fitness wasn't just a lifestyle, it was hope. Hope that you could buy a shortcut to discipline. Celebrities got involved. Action movies made muscle the new standard of cool. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, every kid wanted that look. Training stopped being something weird. It became part of pop culture. Fitness was the new fashion. You weren't just strong, you were stylish. Lycra pants, headbands, neon colors, everyone bouncing to upbeat synth music. Gyms turned from dungeons into discos. But underneath all that shine, the essence was slipping. The brotherhood vibe from the old days got replaced with sales pitches. Trainers turned into salesmen. Membership plans came with contracts and hidden fees. Motivation got monetized. Join now, limited time offer. The gym that once felt like a second home now felt more like a business meeting. Still, it wasn't all bad. For the first time, average people, office workers, parents, students, started training seriously. The iron world had opened its doors to everyone. You didn't have to be a bodybuilder to belong. And that inclusivity was powerful. People were taking their health into their own hands, realizing that strength wasn't just for freaks. It was for everyone. The industry grew fast. Too fast. When money enters anything pure, it changes the rules. What used to be about work turned into branding. Magazines stopped showing lifters drenched in sweat and started showing smiling models with light dumbbells. The message shifted from be strong to look fit. A small difference in words, but a huge one in meaning. Machines replaced free weights. They looked cleaner, safer, more modern. You didn't need to learn technique anymore. Just sit down and move the handle. The machine did the thinking for you. It was easier, smoother, less intimidating. And that's exactly what the new customers wanted. The gym was no longer a place to conquer. It was a service you paid for. As the 80s rolled into the 90s, gyms became franchises. One opened on every corner. Gold's, Bally Total Fitness, 24-hour fitness. Each one promising results with the same smiling stock photos. Training became routine, predictable. You could walk into any gym in the country and know exactly what it would look like. That was the goal. Consistency, not character. The hardcore lifters noticed the shift. They still trained the old way, heavy, loud, chalk everywhere, but they were now the minority. To the new crowd, they looked out of place, almost intimidating. Lunk alarms, no grunt policies, rules against dropping weights. That was the direction gyms were going. Strength was being sanitized. At the same time, bodybuilding shows got bigger, flashier, more competitive. The physiques reached a point where they didn't even look human anymore. Huge, dry, extreme. Sponsors poured money in. Supplement companies paid athletes to hold tubs and smile. Muscle had become marketing. The same barbell that once symbolized self-discipline was now a prop for a photo shoot. And yet, deep down, the core of it all was still there. Somewhere between the glossy ads and the glowing machines, people were still chasing that old feeling. That moment when you push past your limit and realize you've got more in you than you thought. That never changed. The 80s and 90s were a paradox. On the surface, it was the golden age of fitness. Everyone working out, everyone chasing wellness. But underneath, something quieter was happening. The gym stopped being about who you were becoming and started being about how you looked while getting there. Progress became aesthetic. Still, you can't deny what that era did. It made fitness global. It brought health into the mainstream, gave people reasons to move, to care about their bodies. It showed that strength could sell, and for better or worse, that's what made the industry explode. By the end of the 90s, lifting wasn't counterculture anymore. It was business. The iron had turned into gold. Every rep had a price tag. Every protein shake had a sponsor. But the fire, that raw drive from the basements and beaches, it didn't die. It just went quiet, hidden beneath layers of marketing and comfort, waiting for the next generation to dig it back out. And that's the funny thing about progress. It always gives and takes. The gym world had grown richer, cleaner, and bigger than ever, but some of its soul got lost in the trade. Not gone forever, just buried under noise. Because even when the bar was polished chrome instead of rusted steel, it still weighed the same. It still asked the same question: how bad do you want it? By the early 2000s, the fitness world had gone full Showtime. Gyms weren't just gyms anymore. They were lifestyle hubs. Chrome machines, smoothie bars, playlists that changed by the hour. Everyone had branded gear, wireless headphones, and a favorite pre-workout that made them feel unstoppable for at least 15 minutes. The vibe had shifted. The grind was still there, but now it was filtered, stylized, and ready for upload. People trained, but they also posed, filmed, and compared. The gym wasn't just a place to work, it was a stage. Strength had gone digital. Social media changed everything. Suddenly, progress wasn't measured in strength or discipline, but in followers. The camera replaced the mirror, and validation replaced effort. One good angle could make you look like a champion. One viral clip could make you a coach overnight. The gym turned into content. You could scroll for hours and see people doing the same workouts in different lighting, selling the same supplements with slightly different taglines. Transform your life in 12 weeks. New you, new year. The hustle was real, but so was the performance. And it worked. Billions of dollars poured in. Brands exploded. Everyone wanted a piece of the fitness pie. Influencers, nutritionists, lifestyle coaches. Gyms evolved into full ecosystems of marketing. You didn't just train there, you consumed there. You wore the brand, drank the shake, followed the influencer, joined the challenge. It was a subscription model for self-improvement. The hardcore old heads rolled their eyes, but the truth was simple. It worked for most people. The fitness world had become accessible, colorful, and exciting. You didn't need to know how to lift heavy, you just needed to look like you did. Image mattered more than intensity. And people bought in because the aesthetic was addictive. The fit look became the new beauty standard. For men, shredded, lean, symmetrical. For women, strong, but not too strong. Fitness moved out of gyms and into fashion, ads, and music videos. Having abs was now social currency. But something felt off. Training wasn't about becoming better anymore. It was about appearing better. Workouts were built around camera angles, not progress. Nutrition became a contest of who could eat cleaner or count macros harder. The goal was no longer strength, health, or power. It was attention. Every app, every product, every influencer promised to make the process easier. AI workouts, smartwatches, DNA-based meal plans. Technology did everything except lift the damn weight for you. The gym became almost too convenient, too comfortable. The struggle was gone. And yet, deep down, people missed it. That sense of raw effort, of pushing against something real. You could see it in the ones who still trained without filming, who didn't care about the algorithm, who came in, lifted, and left. No captions, no hashtags, just sweat. They didn't post motivation, they lived it. The rise of aesthetics made fitness more popular than ever, but also emptier. Everyone looked fit, but fewer people were actually strong. The new generation grew up chasing the look, not the feeling. And the look fades fast. That's why burnout hits so many so hard, because it's hard to stay passionate about something that's only skin deep. Still, there's no denying that this era built a new kind of athlete, hybrid, modern, creative. They mixed bodybuilding with CrossFit, calisthenics, powerlifting, even dance. Fitness became art again, just in a different way. The tools changed, but the needs stayed the same. To move, to fight gravity, to see what the body can do. And among the noise, a few voices still reminded everyone what it was really about. Guys who said, stop chasing the perfect shot, chase the perfect set. People who preached consistency over hype. The message was simple but true. Muscles fade, likes disappear, but strength stays. The gym had gone from a sanctuary to a stage, from a test to a trend. But even in the middle of that chaos, the iron still spoke the same language. The plates didn't care about your followers. The bar still asked for effort, not filters. And that, more than anything, is why people kept coming back. Because even in this shiny, polished, sponsored world, the weight was still the only thing that couldn't lie. That's the paradox of the modern era. Everything's easier, faster, prettier, but somehow less real. And yet, the truth hides in plain sight. You can strip away the brands, the tech, the hashtags, and the sound of metal hitting the floor still gives you goosebumps. Because no matter how digital the world becomes, effort still has a sound, and it's the sound that built everything in the first place. By the mid-2000s, the shine had started to fade. The gyms were packed, the playlists were loud, the mirrors were spotless, but the soul was missing. Everything looked perfect, but it didn't feel right. You could walk into any commercial gym, see 100 people moving, and still feel like nothing was really happening. The grind had been replaced with routine. Then, almost quietly, the rebellion started. It wasn't planned or marketed. It was just a few people who got tired of fake smiles and core blasters. They wanted noise, chalk, and sweat again. So they went back underground, garage gyms, warehouse setups, small corners in industrial areas, the kind of places where the floor shakes when someone drops a deadlift. The first thing they did, get rid of the bullshit. No juice bars, no neon lights, no mirrors covering every wall, just racks, barbells, plates, and maybe an old radio that only played one channel. These weren't gyms for everyone. They were for the ones who actually wanted to work. It spread fast. Powerlifting grew, strongman came back, CrossFit blew up. People were done pretending. They didn't care about perfect lighting. They wanted results. They missed the feeling of something heavy in their hands, the honesty of effort. The harder it got, the more alive they felt. The vibe was completely different from the corporate gyms. No one flexed between sets or filmed every rep. Everyone respected the grind. You could walk in, nod to a stranger, and suddenly you're training partners. No words needed. Just shared pain and the same soundtrack, metal plates colliding, chalk hitting the floor, and that deep, primal breathing when someone pushes a new max. These hardcore spots became more than gyms. They were reminders that somewhere under all the apps, ads, and comfort, the old spirit was still breathing. It never died. It just went quiet until someone turned the volume back up. And people came. People who'd never known what it felt like to train without mirrors. People who were tired of performance. They found out that the iron didn't care about your phone, your followers, or your excuses. You either lift or you don't. Simple. It wasn't just old school nostalgia. It was something deeper. The hunger to feel real again. You could see it in their eyes. Every rep looked like a conversation between anger and discipline. Every PR felt like a comeback story. Nobody clapped, nobody filmed, but everyone knew when something real happened. Even the pros started coming back to that raw energy. Some opened their own hardcore gyms, concrete floors, graffiti walls, busted fans. They didn't need fancy branding. The vibe sold itself. You walked in and instantly felt it, the same atmosphere that built legends decades ago. And that's when it hit people. Progress didn't mean leaving the past behind. It meant remembering what made it worth doing in the first place. Technology and trends made lifting smarter, sure, but without that edge, that fight, it was just movement without meaning. The new generation started mixing both worlds. They'd train in old school ways but still share it online, not for likes, but to show what effort actually looks like. No filters, no fake positivity, just real sessions, loud music, shaky hands, and that look when you realize you've got one more rep in you. That honesty started catching fire again. Even commercial gyms began to adapt. A hardcore corner here, a set of old dumbbells there. Everyone suddenly remembered that people didn't just come for fitness. They came to feel alive. The industry had turned full circle. The iron had won again. But this comeback wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about identity. People were tired of the world telling them who to be, how to train, what to eat. The barbell doesn't care about trends. It doesn't ask for your opinion. It just waits. And when you step up to it, all that outside noise disappears. It's just you, gravity, and truth. That's the real reason the old spirit returned. Because deep down, people realized they missed honesty. Real progress doesn't need approval. It needs effort. And in that effort, there's peace. The same peace those old lifters found in dusty basements decades ago. Maybe that's why, even with all the new gear and science, people still end up in places with flickering lights, cracked floors, and rusty racks. Because when the bar hits your hands and the weight starts moving, nothing else matters. That feeling, that's what everyone's chasing. The lost spirit wasn't lost after all. It was just waiting for the noise to die down. And when it did, it came back harder than ever. Stronger, meaner, cleaner. Not to preach about the past, but to remind everyone why we started in the first place. Because trends come and go, but the iron stays the same. It doesn't care about decades, styles, or slogans. It's always there, waiting to test whoever's brave enough to pick it up. The fitness world kept moving forward. Newer gyms, newer tech, cleaner spaces. The air smells like eucalyptus now, not sweat. Machines count your reps, watches track your heartbeat, and apps tell you when to rest. Everything's easier, faster, optimized. You don't even need to think anymore. The gym does it for you. And yet, somehow, people still burn out, still quit, still feel like something's missing. Because comfort doesn't build passion. Struggle does. You can dress the gym however you want, but the truth never changes. You still have to show up, lift the weight, and face what's in front of you. The funny thing, the bar doesn't care how modern the world gets. It doesn't care about your playlist, your supplements, or your brand new lifting shoes. It's the same as it was 50 years ago. Cold, heavy, and honest. You either move it or it crushes you. And that honesty is why people keep coming back. Every generation thinks they're the first to discover lifting, but the truth is, they're all chasing the same thing. That moment when gravity fights back and you decide you're not going to quit. It's not about muscles, it's about defiance, about choosing effort when comfort's easier. All the progress, all the science, all the marketing, none of it replaces that simple ritual. You walk in, load the bar, and ask yourself the same question everyone's been asking for a century. How bad do you want it? Somewhere in every gym, big or small, clean or grimy, someone's answering that question right now. Doesn't matter if they're wearing brand new gear or a torn hoodie. Doesn't matter if the plates are shiny chrome or chipped rust. When they grab that bar, the noise of the world shuts off. There's no pretending in that moment. No algorithm can fake that feeling. That's what makes the iron timeless. It's the one thing in this world that hasn't learned how to lie. Everything else changes. Trends, culture, people. But 100 kilos is still 100 kilos. Always has been, always will be. Maybe that's why it still matters. Because it's real. Because in a world where everything is filtered, the gym is still one of the last honest places left. You can't buy effort. You can't cheat weight. You can't fake strength. The bar knows. It always knows. And when you walk out, sore, drenched, and quiet, you know too. That feeling doesn't need a caption. It doesn't need validation. It's yours, earned the old way. So, yeah, the world changed. The gyms changed. People changed. But the weight, it stayed the same. It always tells the truth. And that's why, no matter what happens next, no matter how smart the machines get, how perfect the lighting becomes, the sound of a barbell hitting the floor will always mean the same thing it did 50 years ago. Someone out there is still trying.